Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our latest member training in home. We are so excited to have each of you here tonight. Thank you for taking the time out to be with us this evening. This is a really important training that we're doing today, and we have such an amazing group of panelists here to help us get through it. We are so excited to have as our moderator, Tamika Fox-Hartman. So Tamika joined the Junior League of Phoenix in 2015, and through her league career, she served in a number of leadership positions, including vice chair and chair of this very group member training, and as administrative vice president. In 2018, she participated in the AGLI's Organizational Development Institute, also known as ODI. We have a lot of acronyms here. She currently works for the town of Gilbert, where she focuses on employment law and compliance. And in addition to her work with the Junior League, Tamika is a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, and if she doesn't have any free time at all, an adjunct professor at South Mountain Community College. She also serves on the Women's Golf Association Board of Directors, and in her spare time, though I don't know when that is based on all of this, she lives in Gilbert with her husband and her dog Huey, and she enjoys golf, reading, traveling, and one of my favorites, great wine. So please welcome Tamika.
Thank you for joining us tonight. I would like to begin with a little bit of what I'm calling, or what we're calling, DE&I ground rules. So it's kind of the level set for us tonight. And so the first one is to recognize. We want to recognize that we must strive to overcome historical biases, such as racism and sexism in our society. And then we want to acknowledge that we are all systemically taught misinformation about our own and about members of other groups. Trust that everyone has to come to the table to learn, grow, and share. We acknowledge that we may be at different stages of learning this type of content, but we want to trust that people are going to do the best they can. We all make mistakes, so let's challenge and encourage each other to do better. And then respect. We agree to treat other participants, reflections, and questions with respect, and we care and respect with the goal of helping each other. Understanding that no one speaks for an entire group. We share individual experiences, and let's share the air to ensure that we hear from as many participants as possible. We want to include all voices tonight in this discussion, and we can learn from each of you. So be prepared to submit your questions. And then ask for help. It's okay not to know. Keep in mind that we are all still learning and are bound to make mistakes when approaching a complex task or exploring a new idea. I always say, have a safe friend so that you can ask that question that you might be embarrassed to ask openly. And then be open to changing your mind and make a space for others to do the same as well. So those are our DE&I ground rules for tonight. And again, I'm glad that you are here to participate. So next up, we have our panelists, and you see their lovely photos on the screen. I'm going to read their bios. Listen intently, because these ladies have done some awesome things. First up, we have Kelly Kasenfeth, known to many in the JLP as Kelly K. She is currently slated as president-elect. Professionally, she's the marketing director and associate vice president at Aztec Engineering, where she's the youngest member and only one of 2 women on the officer track. Within Junior League, Kelly has traversed several leadership roles, including chair of 2 community programs, vice president of communications and marketing, development manager, and executive vice president. She's a dedicated volunteer. Kelly has served on several community boards outside of JLP, with the core of her passions concentrated on advancing women's leadership development opportunities, STEM programming, and mentoring first-generation and low-income students to reach their fullest potential. She's received JLP's Mary Ogilvie Golden Kazoo Award. She's been nominated for the Greater Phoenix Chamber of Commerce's Athena Award, recognized as 40 under 40 by the Phoenix Business Journal, and was recently listed by Engineering News-Record in its top 20 under 40 outstanding young professionals in the Southwest region. Whew, Kelly. She's married to Tony Holt, and together they have 2 children, a 2-year-old named Lucy and a 1-year-old named Max. Kelly has her hands full. Next up on our panel is Raquel Hudson King. Raquel is a senior manager in Deloitte's HR transformation practice. As a global leader in the HR field, she supports some of the world's most notable brands with enriching the digital experience for their workforce. Raquel advises on the realities that evolving technology and human capital trends have on global HR organizations and helps her clients prepare, implement, and sustain broad-based complex global solutions. Raquel's background includes elevating the human experience for workforces across Europe, China, Southeast Asia, North America, and Latin America, across the consumer products, retail, banking, and oil and gas industries. Raquel lives in Dallas, Texas, with her husband and educator, Chad King, along with their very determined and not afraid to let you know 2-year-old daughter, Ava. I feel like she's a future member of Junior League. She holds a Master's of Business Administration and Finance from Texas Christian University and a Bachelor of Business Administration in Human Resources and Organizational Behavior from the University of North Texas. Welcome, Raquel. And last but not least, our third panelist is Allie Corbin. Allie moved to Phoenix from North Carolina in 2011. She attended UNCW as an undergrad and Marquette University for graduate school. Allie serves as the Director of Consumer Insights at Navigate, a research, analytics, and consulting firm in sports business. Allie has been a member of the Junior League since 2012. As an active member, she chaired Rummage 3 times, sat on several other committees, and served as president of the JLP Foundation. She is a member of the AZDD Bombshells, one of 6 teams who compete with the Arizona Derby Days, Arizona's only bank-tracked roller derby league. She's an avid CrossFitter, hiker, dog snuggler, vintage enthusiast, hence rummage interest, and a hot sauce connoisseur. Welcome, Allie. We're gonna start with a poll that you all will be able to answer, and our panelists will also be able to answer. So what does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you? If you would go on the internet, you can do it on your phone, to www.menti.com, and you can use the code that's on the screen there. We want to hear from you. Give us a word, a phrase, whatever. What does DE&I mean to you? Got some words popping up here. These word clouds are pretty cool. So I see representation, looks like it's a common word. It's pretty big on the screen. Acceptance. While you are still answering our poll, and feel free to continue to participate because the word cloud will continue to evolve as we go on, I wanted to, like I said, pose this question to our panelists. I'm going to add a little more to it though for our panelists. So what does diversity and inclusion mean to you, and what value does it bring? Let's start with Allie, since she was the last person that I introduced.
You know, I've been thinking about this question since we received, the topic and what we were talking about tonight. And the first word that I thought of was hard. I think this is very hard because it's unique to every single person. it requires us to break down our own thoughts or what we've been taught and rebuild them. And I think that's really hard to think outside of yourself. You have to be vulnerable. Ultimately, I think that it's being mindful and proactive and building that connection with other people and realizing, there's more to this world than whatever recipe that was given to you growing up. Ultimately, feeling safe is where I landed.
Yeah. I like that. Hard. One word. Did you add that to the word cloud?
I didn't, but I will.
Yeah. How about you, Raquel? What does diversity and inclusion mean to you, and what value does it bring?
Sure. So for me, it means seeing color and appreciating color. It means seeing everyone for their differences and appreciating the value that those differences bring. And when you put people together from different backgrounds, different values, different experiences, you get something that's more creative than what would have originally been. So I think that's what it means to me. And I think that's the value that it brings. The last thing that I'll say about that is authenticity. When you get authentic individuals in the workplace, because they're comfortable, because they feel like they're in a trusted and a safe space, using the word Ali used, I think that enables people to relax and be creative and be innovative, and that adds value as well.
Yes, love it. And then Kelly, what does diversity and inclusion mean to you, and what value does it bring?
Ditto all of that. For me, I hope one day we can get to a place where we don't have to think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, that we will have achieved it when we are able just to value what everyone's contributions are to the table. I think with DE&I, the work that we're doing, we have to think about it from the perspective of what are we missing? Like, what is the community or our organization missing when we don't have diversity? When we don't keep good people in the door or members in the door in light of the Junior League, when we provide barriers, whether we recognize those barriers or not, after we invite them, into our table. So I think that's the value component. Like, what's the value that we're missing when we don't have that diversity?
Yeah. Right on, ladies. Okay, so let's roll into a couple of other questions. And this question is for Raquel. Raquel, in reading your bio, you work with a lot of diverse people and you're in the HR field. And I think this is probably a fitting question for you. And the question is, as a leader, how can you prioritize diversity and inclusion in both your personal life and work life?
I always find that a challenging question, believe it or not, primarily because for me, I don't know any other way. I wake up Black, I go to bed Black, and that's how I live life. And you sort of operate in a space where you are a person of color. And so diversity is a normal thing. I don't think I've ever had to really actively work hard to try to, put extra initiatives to encourage diversity, because you just sort of see, color, appreciate, and accept people for who they are and what they bring. But if you haven't been in that type of society or that type of environment, it can be a push. And what I will say I'm seeing clients do is they are having those tough conversations at the door. There's no more of this, let's sort of skirt around, let's use safe language, which you should always intend to. But when you try to mute individuals, you don't really get that authenticity. So I'm seeing clients break down that barrier and really open up and encourage those conversations, ask the tough questions, ask the things that you don't know. And I'm seeing them respond in a way that answers accordingly. The other thing I will say that I have seen interesting, especially working with cross-border teams, worked with a number of teams and had resources across India, Asia. I did an expat assignment in Asia. My husband and I lived there for a year. And you sort of, in those experiences, have to force it. There's no diversity in China. So how do you talk about diversity and initiatives? And it's not a thing. But when you have these cross-border teams, you're sort of forced to do that. And so that's where you do have to be creative. And I've been challenged in that way as well. And by that, I mean forcing the team, not forcing, but saying, let's get out, have dinner with your coworkers. Let's get out, let's ask questions about what are some of the cultural norms, experience it. Do your research, educate yourself. Don't rely on somebody from that culture to educate you. Educate yourself so that way you show up more informed and you don't make the silly mistakes. And that you can enable that authenticity and comfort that's needed from the other individual. So that's what I'm seeing some of my clients do to just try to enable those tough conversations.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that, especially from the personal life perspective. Like you, I'm a Black woman, can't hide that. And I live that every day. So to hear it from a work perspective is great. I feel like shying away from it is not going to work. So I love your examples on that. Let's move on. Kelly, this question is for you. What does your sponsorship or mentorship network look like at work? Considering you were one of two on the high leadership track, I think I read. And then has it been challenging to surround yourself with effective sponsors because of your race or ethnicity or sexual orientation?
Thanks for the question. So I work in the engineering industry, but I'm not an engineer. I'm a woman, but I work in marketing. And I'm Asian, but contrary to stereotypes, math and science are not my subjects because I was an English major. So all of these things I've internalized. I live every day in my career working in marketing for an engineering industry. And so having a big network was really important to me. When I moved here to Arizona, that was one of the first things that my first boss, Tim, told me. He said that it was really important to find other women in the industry who can really help to mentor me in this industry. So for me, that network is just being able to be open to volunteer on, association boards or other volunteer things that are connected with my career to be more than a member. You volunteer on those committees, you serve on those boards, because that's where you build the relationships and you set yourself up for success, where people, can recognize what your skills are, what your contributions can be. They see beyond you just being like this marketing gal, doing her job. And so I've been able to lean on my network for so many things now for, just my career. When I went on maternity leave, that was a really hard decision for me, whether I should even apply for JLP president, because I'm a mom of 2 under 2, and how that might impact my career. And so having, that network and that sponsorship has been really important to me, because they've given me valuable advice about how to move up in an industry that is male dominated. And it's, being able to just really prove your worth and, showing people that you have those skills, that you've earned it.
Great. Yeah, some of the stereotypes about the field you're in, I'm sure when you first were starting out, was something you had to overcome. So thank you. Allie, to what extent do you feel that you can disclose your whole identity to your colleagues, friends, and family? What's been easy about sharing, and what's been hard?
Oh man, this is a good one. It's interesting. I almost feel like I have compartmentalized all those things that you just asked, because they all are a little bit different. My workspace, my personal space, my family space. And my journey has been evolving. So I would say it's probably going to continue to meander. But I can remember, so I'm gay. I came out 2014, I think, so 6 years ago. At that time, I did not know what it meant to be gay. I didn't have any close friends. I didn't have any family members. I didn't understand what it meant, because you're taught all these things in the media, which I'm sure everyone on here can relate to in some capacity, whether it's your skin color, your religion, your location, where if people don't reflect you, you just sort of absorb the majority. And so I was very much in the heteronormative mind space. But I, over time, realized I didn't have to do that. I kind of put myself in that situation based on things that I learned, and I had to unlearn them. I do work for a very small firm. We have 14 full-time people, and we serve as an actual team. And everybody counts, everybody's important, and we know everyone very, very well. And I can be as authentic and as vulnerable as I want to. And my team does the exact same in return. And so in that capacity, it's been awesome. And in fact, I think they were probably one of the first teams of people who knew. I remember telling the junior league, and that was very scary because most people in the JLP are straight, or it's not very vocalized if you are anything other than that, which is not a bad thing. I know that's something that there are many people in our league who have got to be on some part of it. It's just not a very outward thing. And so I was very nervous to tell people. At that time, I was in a leadership role, and it was very scary because I was taught that being gay was very bad, which leads me to my family. Most of my family is great, but I don't speak with my mom, which gives me a totally different element. So being gay is like one thing, but then not speaking to your mom because you're gay is very weird. And when we have a very women-centric organization and everybody's talking about being a mom, and there's Mother's Day, and there's all these other things that nobody, or I never thought about, it's definitely different, but it helps provide a lot of empathy for me, because then I think about people who don't have dads, or I think about people and, pick another situation. So for me, it helps me become even more involved in that space. I would say today I am as confident as I could ever be in myself. I surround myself with people who accept me. I don't really have many issues necessarily, but it's been quite the journey. 6 years ago seems like yesterday. It also seems like a really long time. Yeah, unfortunately, I do work in sports, which to Kelly's point about stereotypes, there are a lot of gay women and men in sports. So I have been a little bit fortunate in that regard, but I still face a lot of interesting things. It's a very male-dominated field. So I experience a lot of different things, not just necessarily one, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight.
Yeah, wow. Thank you for sharing and being so vulnerable to those of us who may have known these things about you and those of us who didn't. So appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I can go on and on about some of the things you pointed out, but I will not. Another day, another discussion. This question is for Raquel. We haven't heard from her in a while. Can you share some examples of how D&I policy affects your organization or your volunteer work? And it could be in a positive or a negative way.
Yeah, sure. So within Deloitte, we're pretty large. We have about 275,000 employees globally, and about 50,000 of those are in the US, which is where we have really focused in terms of diversity. What I will say is with initiatives that we've been rolling out, we've pocketed it in. And one of the things that I'll talk about what we've stopped doing and what we've started doing. One of the things that we tried to stop doing a few years ago was we tried to dissipate some of our employee resource network groups. So we had the Black Employee Network Group, we have the Asian American Employee Network Group, the Latinx group as well. And we tried to get rid of those with the intent of saying, let's stop having closed door conversations because we know what the experiences are. Let's go out and educate those who are driving some of the disparities. That didn't work. And it got a lot of pushback, and I think rightfully so. And what it led to was a need to switch up the way that we were doing and delivering some of our diversity programming. So we do have our employee resource network groups again. They're more grassroots. They're not governed as wholly by centralized anymore. So within certain cities, you can develop one on your own. So one thing that we stopped doing as well was we stopped peanut butter spreading some of our diversity initiatives. I find that when you peanut butter spread, and I'll explain what that means, but when you peanut butter spread, it's less effective. When I say peanut butter spread, I mean, let's stop grouping all of the minorities into one group and then having conversations and assuming that all of the issues that they experience are the same. Let's stop grouping all of the all of our LGBTQ members into one group and assuming that all of their experiences are exactly the same. So we started bifurcating, and by doing that, we were able to target some of our programming so you hit on some of the real issues that need to be addressed. Similarly, after the murder of George Floyd, the Black community really needed to have its safe space at work. Conversations about what was happening in the Black community needed to be had, and you couldn't really have those conversations in a broader, more generalized setting. So I've seen that work really, really well, and I'm starting to see some of our clients take that on as they try to address some of these issues as well.
Great idea. I love that. I think within the Junior League, we could benefit from even some of that thought process because we're, new in this field and we have diverse members. And I find that when you can get with someone who's like-minded even, it does help you navigate in the space where you are a minority. And so that's good to hear you say that. I'm going to take that nugget away back to my own job. So thank you. Allie, what is one piece of advice you would give to someone like yourself starting out in your career?
I think the thing I would tell people is this kind of goes hand in hand a little bit with what Raquel was saying earlier about authenticity. But I think that doing a little bit of soul searching on your own versus absorbing what people tell you should think about whatever you identify. Because I think that if you let other people dictate the way you see things, you're living somebody else's truth. You're walking around in somebody else's idea. I think starting out, for me especially, I wish that I was less focused on being liked or blending in, because that's what I really wanted. I can remember that as a kid. I was always overweight and I just wanted to blend in. Or I can remember other things, not having as much money as the other people, but I still wanted to blend in. And that carried with me into college and graduate school. And then I realized, I have my own light to shine. I'm amazing. So I think it's very important to be vulnerable and to be as authentic as possible, and also realize that there is an ebb and flow. So whatever you are today doesn't necessarily mean is what you're going to be in a year. And I think the sooner you can remember that, easier it is on yourself, and then the easier it is to relate to other people. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Kelly, I would like to ask you the same question, but maybe more from a Junior League perspective, considering all the wonderful things you've done in the Junior League. So what is one piece of advice you would give to someone starting out in their Junior League career?
Be willing to be open and be vulnerable. Say yes to opportunities. It's not lost on me that I'm going to be the first Asian American to lead the Junior League of Phoenix, and just a handful of other women of color across the country who have led junior leagues in the president roles. But I would hope that I'd be more than that headline. The advice that I would give to you is to visualize what you want out of the Junior League. If that's just building friendships and relationships, that's fine. If it's having more of a volunteer leadership resume, that's great. And then having a plan for those type of things. If you want friends, then you better go to those social events. If you want to build that leadership resume, you better apply for a leadership position. As we talk about DE&I and what that looks like for the Junior League of Phoenix, my advice is to participate in those conversations. As Allie said, for her word, for what DE&I is, it's hard. And it is hard for us as Junior League members to maybe talk about it because of our history. When the Junior League started 100 years ago, I couldn't join as a member, and look at the evolution of the organization since then. But we still have a long way to go, and a lot of past for us to recognize, but a lot of work ahead of us as well as we work towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it involves everyone participating in your own thoughtful way.
Yes, great tips and advice. Thank you. All right, so let's see. I've got a few more questions. How are we looking in the questions in the chat? Are we saving those to the end? Or do we have any pertinent ones?
I think we can save them until the end. So far, we have a few. Keep them coming, friends.
All right, thank you. I would like to ask this question of Raquel, and I asked it to Allie earlier, but it's interesting perspective because Raquel works in a different environment. So Raquel, to what extent do you feel that you can disclose your whole identity to your colleagues, friends, and families? And what's been easy about that and what's been hard?
Yeah, so I will say Deloitte is sort of a unique place. I'm learning as I've been out in the marketplace where I absolutely can be my authentic self at work. And it's very diverse. As I mentioned earlier, I work with cross-border teams, so much so that on one of my accounts, I had a white male sit next to me and he was like, "Oh my gosh, your hair is different every day." And I said, "Oh, stick with me. By the end of this, you will know all you need to know about Black women's hair." And so being able to just have that exchange is not normal in the workplace, but at Deloitte, that's very common. And it's met with authenticity and with respect. And in a lot of cases, not in all cases, but in most cases from my experience. But that's Raquel's experience. I can't say that that's the 100% of the time the experience across our firm for all people of color or people of different genders and sexual preferences. So there are the occasional stories that come up. I have not always worked in an environment that inviting. Before I worked in banking and in the financial industry, and in the financial industry in Texas, it's predominantly white male. So walking into the room and being the only female, being young, and in a lot of cases being the only person, in most cases, the only person of color, you stand out and you're different, and you're not always welcome with open arms either or accepted. And so that was challenging. There were times where I would walk into the room. I remember walking into a networking event, having a conversation with someone, and within like the first 60 seconds of an exchange, his response was, "Oh my gosh, you speak so well." It was, I just said, "Hi, how are you doing?" and explained a little bit about myself within 60 seconds. Why do you feel the need to say that, right? But it's that bias that I don't even know if it was conscious or unconscious that he had about what he expected to come out of a young Black woman's mouth, right? So it's those type of experiences that sort of make you kind of retreat and not want to bring your authentic self to work. But it takes having those allies and having that welcoming environment where you know that people do respect your merit, they do care about your success in the organization before you feel welcome to be your authentic self. So if you remember nothing else tonight, remember allyship matters, and in enabling the next person's success around you, no matter what background they come from.
Great, thank you for sharing. That's going to lead into another question, because I do have a question about being an ally and how to be a better ally to provide more support in the workplace or even in like your junior league, even in other volunteer organizations. So Kelly, maybe you can start with this one and we'll kind of go down the road, but how do you think people could be a better ally and provide more support in the workplace or even in junior league for people who are different, for diverse backgrounds? Because a lot of the books out there say having an ally, having a different voice really helps, and oftentimes allow that group that's underrepresented to have a bigger, louder voice or be heard. So how do you think allies can provide more support?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, especially now in this time of change that we're in with the community, like we are having those hard conversations about the importance of diversity and inclusion in the workplace or in our organization. But I think it begins with yourself. I mean, to be a better ally, you have to continue working on yourself to, we've talked about coming from that place of openness and vulnerability. But it's also understanding just how your background, your race, your socioeconomic status, all of those like they call it the intersectionality categories of what it means to be a woman in today's society, how those things have just played a role in who you are today. And so when you better understand what your biases are, what like Ali talked about, growing up and what was right or wrong, whether that was right or wrong, when we better understand our values and where we've been, it helps us in that journey of allyship of where we're going. So continue working on yourself, and that just means being open and vulnerable and having conversations and opening yourself up to people of all different types of backgrounds.
Yeah, thank you. Ali, what do you think about that? How can people be a better ally and provide more support, even in your workplace or at the Junior League, for example?
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting question because it's so hard, you know what I mean? Coming back to what I was saying before, because everybody is different, but I think for me, the best thing when it comes to being a positive ally, let's say, is to strip any assumptions that you have about whatever it is. For me, being a lesbian, people are kind of like, what does that mean? Or like, how come you don't have short hair? Or, you think of all these things, and I have to remember also the media or what people are taught as well. And I have to be just as gentle as I hope people would be to me. So removing any assumptions. Most people just think I'm straight. Most people ask if I have a husband. I don't know. There's a number of other things. And so I think that if you can just not assume, and I'm coming at this from a sexuality perspective, but don't assume somebody, their sexuality, their pronouns, their preferences. There's a lot of things that we see externally, how you present yourself, and you make a lot of those immediate decisions or immediate thoughts. And I think that, to your point earlier, asking questions, even if they're weird or if they seem like silly and you should know it and you don't, I think the more vulnerable you can be as an ally, just as much as with yourself, makes it easier to connect. One example of this is I have been known from time to time to share experiences about my mom and us not connecting and what that means. And it's really from a place of, being cathartic, sharing it for someone else, maybe someone else can relate. I had never met somebody else who was estranged from a parent. And one time I shared on Facebook or somewhere about, a holiday or my mom's birthday, or I don't know what it was, something of significance that I felt compelled to share. And someone in the Junior League reached out to me and said that she was estranged from her mom for a completely different reason, but it made me feel less alone and like an alien. Because the biggest thing about my situation is I just can't relate to many people, and no one can really relate to me. And so it becomes really awkward because people feel sorry or they don't know what to say. I think being vulnerable in that capacity and then asking questions, like I was saying before, just makes it feel less weird because we're all in our own bubble and there's nothing normal or, right about any of us. We really get to dictate that on our own. So yeah. I don't even know if that was succinct in any one response, but hopefully it helps understand that just don't assume anything about any one person and actually try to get to know them just like you would hope somebody would try to do the same for you as well.
Thank you. And Raquel, I think we have some few more minutes. Do you want to take a stab at how people could be better allies or provide more support in the workplace for you?
Yeah, this is, believe it or not, at Deloitte, it's actually a topic that we've been talking about a lot, both within certain ethnicity groups and outside of it, in different sexual orientation pockets as well throughout the firm. Just having that conversation, right? How do, I'm going to just make this up, but how do I as a Latinx peer be an ally for, my gay male white colleague, right? So there are different angles to allyship. And it doesn't just mean a white person being an ally for, a person of color or for someone in the LGBTQ community. And then even within, this is interesting, we have a session next month where we're talking about how do I, as a member in the Latinx community, be an ally for somebody else in the Latinx community? That was interesting, and we're dissecting that. And so I think it goes back to everything that Allie just said, and that is don't make assumptions about any individual given where they come from. Of course, as I go back to all the time, see color and appreciate color, and know that because somebody looks different or is different, that they're probably going to have some differences. And they're likely going to have some similarities as well. And I think that is where we make the mistake. We assume that, oh, they're different, so let me go and explore their differences. And it's get to know their similarities as well, because there are a lot of commonalities that could be missed in that. So that's what allyship means to me.
Love it. I love it. If you know a little bit about me, you know that I come from a disability background, or like I like to call it, an ability background, and I tend to navigate towards that population of people, and I didn't realize that I was even being an ally because it was just natural, because I had gotten to know them and their story. And I'm a big believer in it becomes natural when you can find things that are similar about a person, and then your allyship is just a part of your everyday because you truly got to know that person and their story. So work on that, people. I love it. All right. So we've got, it's a few minutes left here, and I want to make sure that we have time for questions. But before I close out any of the panel discussion, I just wanted to allow the panel, if you had anything else that was just on your heart that you wanted to share today. And if not, we will turn it over to some of the questions and some other things that we have on the program. Kelly, Allie, Raquel, anything extra you want to share?
Nothing for me. Happy to dive into Q&A.
Okay.
I have one thought, and I was thinking about this earlier because I just feel like this topic is so complex, and we could probably have 10 more of these discussions. But I think the thing for me that I had to proactively do initially was I had to learn and ingratiate myself with what I felt like was the gay community for me, and learning what that was like. And I feel like my pendulum went from over here to then all the way over here, and I needed to somehow balance myself, because now, you know, I've surrounded myself with other people who are like me, who I feel safe with, who I can relate to. But then you realize you're kind of sitting in a room that's now, you're not helping other people necessarily, or you're not necessarily being, what's the word I'm looking for, an ambassador per se, because I'm already around other people who care about the same topics and justice and all these things. And so I think the only other thing that I would advise other people is to obviously focus on your differences and surround yourself with people where you feel like you're comfortable with whatever that is to you. But then remember, just as much as you want other people to be or inviting other people to your table, you want to like put yourself in other situations so you can educate people. I know it's not necessarily our jobs, I fully get that, but I also think sometimes you can become a little hard, or you are just in your own community and then you're almost doing the opposite. So yeah, I sort of just challenge myself not to be so focused. Like, I'm not defined by being gay. I don't have to just be in a room of LGBT people. It's a lot more comfortable, but I try to challenge myself to also be equally as uncomfortable in a room that, you know, doesn't necessarily have my mirror image.
I like that. Thank you. And Kelly, do you have anything? Or are we ready to move on?
Ready for questions. I think Allie really captured the spirit of this topic. I mean, it's very complex and we can go on and on about it, but yeah, let's jump to the questions.
All right. So I am not able to see the chat.
I have them all.
You got them all?
I've
Okay.
got them all.
I'm gonna be quiet, but I do want to thank our panelists. Thank you for being open and sharing, and then take it away with some of the questions.
Okay, the first one's going to be for Raquel specifically. Was or is there any specific program or methodology that Deloitte employed to create an allyship environment? Basically, how did they create the space for trust, grace, as Allie mentioned, patience for those who may be trying to navigate and learn how to be a good ally?
Yeah, so it's complex, and like anything else we do at Deloitte, we always start with research. If you think about some of the real instances of implicit biases, unconscious biases, whatever you want to call it, or just flat out racism or discrimination, against different groups, we started with that and as the conversation. We took that into leadership and we said, listen, we've got a number of clients out there that are the root cause of some of these issues. We are hearing from our own consultants internally that they are concerned about what's happening, with DACA, what's happening with immigration at the borders, what's happening in the streets across the US. When we took those conversations into different pocket groups with leadership, it created a dialogue around how are we going to respond, one, as an organization, and then two, how do we turn the mirror on ourselves internally and fix our own issues. We started with that, moved into fixing some issues that were at the leadership level, right, having those conversations, and then moved into lower levels of the organization and starting to really identify what are the issues that we're seeing internally, how are those issues internally affected by things happening externally, and then we turned that into programming and initiatives. So I'll give you an example of one. One was we said, let's focus in on our URMs. When you look at certain levels of the organization, we don't have representation of certain minority groups. So we said we have an issue with underrepresented minorities, URMs. And so we started to focus on how do we build a pipeline of talent. We know there's already talented individuals across different groups, but how do we prepare them for leadership, right? So we focused there. We also started implementing other programs around allyship to support that initiative. And so it's kind of taking you on that journey of how that research went from external to internal to different levels to different pockets to now talking about allyship and how that enables the success of those initiatives. One example of an allyship initiative where we've tried our best to enable conversations, we've said, let's get our Black colleagues in a room, let's start a Black Action Council, and let's have conversations with other white leaders across the organization to help them understand the issues and be a part of the dialogue as well. And then let's also give them their own safe space to uncover some issues there. I had a leader call me up and say, hey, what can I do? How do I address some of this? And I remember being very blunt, and I said, a lot of the issues that we are seeing now in terms of racism in America or discrimination to different groups are rooted in certain pockets of the country. And if you look at some of the issues that have come out of the pocket that you sit in, how do you address that? And how do you have that real conversation with those that are in that same pocket with you and have that safe space? So that's how we sort of developed our methodology and went about solving for this. And there are some more specific programs, I'm not going to go into detail, but we can talk offline, of real examples of how we've created that culture of trust and authenticity.
Beautiful, thank you. Allie suggested not assuming someone's sexual orientation or pronouns. Is there a way, Allie or any of the panelists, that you might suggest that we can learn about someone's pronouns? For example, if they don't include them in their email signature block, do we just start by using they, them, or just simply ask what pronouns do you associate with?
That's a great question. I don't think anyone would be offended if you just asked them what's their preferred pronoun. If it's a situation where you've never met and you're emailing them for the first time, the best thing to do is just always use their name. You don't have to say a pronoun, in fact, at all. It was mentioned that I play roller derby. We have several members in our community who identify as non-binary and they use they, them pronouns. And it can be really hard because sometimes when you're saying they, you're referring to a group, and then you're saying they and you're referring to somebody. So not only is it hard to adopt that new language, it's also hard mentally because you're thinking grammatically about it. And I think that if you can kind of let your brain relax a little bit, it's not as bad or as hard as I should say, but using their name never hurts, even if you're saying it 17 times in an email or, in person. And yeah, I personally have never been offended in anyone that I know. I think it's just almost courtesy. And then when it comes to their sexuality or their orientation, I always ask if somebody has a significant other or if they're dating somebody. You don't have to add a pronoun to that or to who it is, and kind of giving them the mic and letting them talk.
Thanks, Allie. This question is kind of long, but I think it's a good one. So I recently started a new job on a culturally diverse team of all men. Due to COVID, all of our meetings are virtual, so I've not actually met with them in person. Do you have any suggestions on learning more about my coworkers in a virtual setting, or how to learn about diversity of others in a virtual world where we're not always in person?
I can kick off this question. Since COVID started, all of my meetings and all of my meetings with the engineers who are predominantly male are also virtual. And the first thing, just take a moment before meetings to maybe connect with people right before, ask them how their day has gone or their weekend. For team builders, I always build out a couple of minutes before a meeting just to do a quick team builder with my team or the project team that I'm working with. And we do this a lot in the junior league too, I've noticed, with our virtual meetings, where we just have a moment where we give a life update. And, those are kind of the connection moments virtually that are not work related, but that help to build the camaraderie of working together separately. And then the other thing that I would say is, think beyond the boundaries. Like, don't think of yourself as the only woman in the room, but, you're just a contributor just like them. Think of it almost as a positive, that you're bringing that value, and that, that difference is a good thing.
Love it. Thanks, Kelly. Here's a tough one for y'all. During an uncomfortable or blatantly sexist or racist conversation, what's a good response or question that an ally can use to speak up?
I'll take this one because I've been told my clapback is perfected. So I think it takes courage, and sometimes, and I will say it takes practice before you can nail the right one-liners or the right comebacks to be able to address certain issues. But I think it is important to not ignore it. If you don't feel comfortable publicly having the conversation with that person or addressing it in a room full of others, you can always pull that person to the side later and use words that may be a bit more comfortable, although I don't. I go right at it and use the uncomfortable language. But I think if you don't feel that confident, you can say things like, hey, I noticed when you said X, person X responded this way, or it might have made them uncomfortable, or hey, did you think, or did you notice, right? So to try to bring them in and engage them. There are other ways as well, if you're a bit more confident in that moment of calling it out and saying, actually, you just stated a fact that I don't even think is a fact. And here's why, right? And just addressing it and opening up the dialogue if it's a safe space to do so. And then the other thing I will also say is, when you do decide to have a conversation offline or pull somebody to the side to address it, always go back to that offended party to let them know. Because usually that person sort of walks out feeling like nobody had my back. And again, I have been made to feel like an other. So I always encourage to make sure that individual also walks away feeling that confidence and knowing that you have their back.
And if I could add on to this, something happened to me the other day where I was on a virtual call and someone said a sexist joke that was like, oh, Kelly, you're looking really hot today, or something like that. And I was dressed up because I was going to like another event later on. And one of the guys spoke up and said, where's HR in the room? That's not appropriate. And so it was just really, it was good to have that, because it just wasn't an appropriate comment in the setting that we were in.
Thank you, Kelly. I want to be mindful of our time because we're 1 minute until 7 and we have 4 more questions. So I think I'll just go do one more question. Does that sound okay? Is everyone thumbs up okay with that? Okay. So what is the one thing that JLP could implement to be more inclusive?
I will go. I was recently chatting with Jenny Elser, who you guys know is our president, and she had some questions for me. She actually came to me with some LGBT specific questions, and it made me realize I remember when AJLI came out with the Junior League rainbow looking logo, and I couldn't believe it. I was pretty blown away. But I feel like visually it would be really awesome, not just to have a rainbow. I don't think that's the only thing that needs to be included, but I think visually there needs to be something where people see it. It's not just a committee. It's not something we hang our hats on that no one else really sees. It's something that could be promoted and you visually see it. And I don't know what that looks like. I'm not a graphic designer, but I think that would be awesome. And I feel like it would actually make people, or at least myself, feel even more proud or connected and want to be more involved. So that would be one thing that I think the Junior League could do.
So I am not a member of Junior League. I have a number of sorority sisters. Tamika, I'm also a woman of Alpha Kappa Alpha, so we'll have to talk. But who are part of Junior League. And one of the things we always say at the firm, and I've talked to my sorority sisters about this as well, is don't just invite somebody to the dance, also ask them to dance as well. And so I know a lot of organizations go through the efforts of recruiting people of color and trying to get people of diverse backgrounds and sexual orientations in their group of different genders. But then there's really not much retention because they end up not feeling included once they do join. So, keep that in mind as the one sort of thing I would say is don't just invite people to the dance, also ask them to dance as well.
And I will add, include them on the party or the dance planning committee. That's a little bit of that equity in there.
Yeah, and if I could also add, I think for me, this is a really complex question, but I think Junior League, sometimes we focus too much on the output of our fundraisers, the actual dollars that we're raising, and not the value that members are getting from that experience or from their membership experience. When you look at us as an organization, as a membership-based organization, Junior Leagues in general, or just nonprofits in general that are membership-driven, need to really be focused on members, because members are your first fundraiser. If members don't stay in the organization and don't pay their annual dues, you're not going to have that committee to build that fundraiser. And so there needs to be a culture shift about how do we invest in the membership experience to make sure people are feeling included, that they say yes year over year to being a member, whether that's staying active or being a sustainer, that they feel that they've had that value out of the Junior League. So it's really that shift when we look at that budget is how do we invest in the membership experience? What do our members want? And less on, not that our fundraisers aren't important, but now that we see in the year of 2020 and COVID, we're not having rummage. So we can't depend on that $135,000, but we can depend on, the members renewing their membership, but only if they want to. So it's a complex answer, but it's investing in that membership experience.
Special thanks to our panelists, Kelly, Raquel, and Allie. This was such a great training. I know everyone on here feels the same way.
I just want to say I think this is great too. I think the more conversations we can have like this, the easier it becomes. And I'd be happy to do something like this again, or if anyone has any questions. I don't know if you guys are sharing our contact info, but just thought I'd throw it out there that I'd be happy to chat with anybody individually if you'd like.
Same, and I'm happy to offer the same sentiments as well. If anyone wants to continue the dialogue, always happy to offline as well.
The committee put together some reading recommendations and some, if you're not really into reading and you just would rather watch a movie or show. So we have some resources here. Also, if you have not been onto the Junior League member page, this is open to everyone. I just put the link in the chat. There are some D&I resources from podcasts, reading materials. If you're a parent and you want to talk to your kids about D&I, these are some great resources out there that if you go to the jlp.org, and it's just at the top of who we are or what we do, and anyone can get on here too. Thank you very much to Tamika, our moderator, Amy, our facilitator, and Kelly, our program coordinator. Thank you to our member training committee for putting this together. and our D&I board subcommittee, Jesse, myself, and Tamika, and there's some others on the call as well. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any other questions. I think Jesse can pass it along if we can get it to you, and then we'll pass along the resources from the slides. So thanks everyone for attending and staying a few minutes.